After one okay game and one horrific game, the Pittsburgh Penguins are back in the winning column with a 4-1 win over the Nashville Predators on the weekend, and they play the Washington Capitals tonight. Hopefully that should be another win. Matt Murray was absolutely sensational. Getting the shutout, he now has a shutout streak against the Predators of over 200 minutes. They have not scored on him in over 3 straight games, dating back to the Stanley Cup Final in June when he got back-to-back shutouts in Game 5 and 6 to seal the cup and bring it back home to Pittsburgh for the second straight year. I don't know what it is about Nashville, but Murray is just completely dominant against them. He only had 26 saves, but they were an excellent 26 saves. He had some tricky shots. He made it look easy. And the Predators played UC Saros because Pecorine has struggled so much against Pittsburgh. It didn't matter. UC Saros was not any better. The Penguins pulled it home, got the win. Ole Mata got a goal. Ryan Reeves got a goal. Malkin got a goal minute into the game. And then Jake the Snake, Jake Gensel, pops another one. And the Penguins win the game. Opening minute, Evgeny Malkin going down the wing, gets the goal, assisted from Hagelin and Kessel as they are now in his line. Roth is now up with Crosby. Sheary is down to the third line. Sheary and Rust are very interchangeable. Sullivan switches them around a lot. I personally like Sheary on there or sit in the kids, although Rust can still be sit in the kids because Rust was only 25 and Sheary's only 25. So either way, crack. It's still a great line. Jake and Crosby are what are dominant in that line, and they showed their dominance again. Despite the fact that Pittsburgh has not played overly well so far in the first 3 games, those two have been absolutely outstanding. They have points in every game. Jake Gensel is picking up where he left off and is showing that he is no fluke. Once again, Pittsburgh has done an outstanding job of finding diamonds in the rough toward the end of the draft. I believe he was the 3rd-round pick, a smaller, undersized player, a fast player, letting them over-ripen, season a bit in the A, the old Detroit method, and bring them to the NHL when they're already mature and they're already in their 20s, because players that are not teenagers and much more mature are able to produce a lot better. We saw what happened with Daniel Sprong. He was rushed too early and he did not look great. Now when he comes back, he'll be mature. He'll probably come back this season and he'll be ready and he'll be dominant. We saw the same thing happen, and then we see the opposite effect with Ole Mata. Maybe he was rushed to the NHL a bit too soon, and he hasn't really lived up to the expectations that he did when he was 19. Or Nazem Kadri for the Leafs, although he seemed to get that back now. But for a long time, he was struggling because he was rushed too early. So it's definitely a fine balance to when to bring those players up, but the Penguins have done an excellent job of bringing them up at the right time. Jake Gensel, they just brought up full-time this season after he's already won the Cup. Matt Murray, they brought him up full-time last season. He still won the Cup twice as a rookie, which is amazing, and he basically forced their hand because he was so good. Tristan Jarry, who's 21, who's the same age as Murray was when he made his debut, is seasoning in the A because they want to let him season a little bit longer. You had Brian Rust, who they didn't bring up till he was 24 or 23. Same thing with Tommy Kuhnhackl. They let him season and they didn't bring him up till he was a bit older. Connor Sheary, they signed as a free agent. He played in the AHL for a year, had an AHL-only contract, tore that league up, I believe, at the age 22, 23, brought him up to the NHL 2015, 2016. He was absolutely dominant. He stayed there ever since with Crosby. We saw the same thing with Scott Wilson. He's more of a grinder, but the same principle applies. He was a 7th-round pick. Sheary was undrafted. Rust was a 4th-round pick. Gensel was a 3rd-round pick. Kuhnhackl was also a 4th-round pick. So they're finding these guys late in the draft, the diamonds in the rough, and they're hitting hard on them. The Penguins have not had a lot of high draft picks because they've done so well, but when they do, they get them really well. They still have their misses like Angelo Esposito and maybe some other players that shouldn't have drafted so early, trading Oscar Sundqvist instead of getting Klim Kostin. Bo Bennett was probably another miss in the first round. So, the draft record is not great, but they're able to really hit on those gems in the 3rd and 4th round, which is hard for a team to do because that's a pretty low conversion rate. So Gensel is just another example of that solid drafting and development that Pittsburgh has put into place in the past few years, and other teams are taking notice of it. So, a lot happened in this game. It was a very chippy game, a very physical game. There's still rivalry from when the teams met in their 6th-round series, which you don't usually see in the East and West, 6-game series. You don't usually see a rivalry in the East and West, but these teams battled hard. There is the Subban Crosby breath thing. There is the overturned goal that Subban scored, a lot of missed calls. There is the Predators not being able to score. There is, the management of the Penguins thought that Crosby and Malkin were pushed around too much to fight the fact that they won back-to-back Stanley Cups. So, of course, they go out and they get Ryan Reeves, and he is supposed to be there to, quote, deter the opponents. Yet, ironically enough, he goes after Scott Hartnell, and Scott Hartnell keeps doing what he's doing. So, he's not really deterring, is he? Ryan Reeves then goes on a line with Sidney Crosby, and then Crosby still gets run out. Ryan Reeves takes a penalty and gets kicked out of the game, and Crosby gets a penalty. How is that helpful? All you're doing is hurting yourself and putting your team down a man when you could have a perfectly, I won't say useful, but, competent bum, such as Josh Archibald in the lineup, for example, who was, okay. He was not a liability, at least, and that's all you're asking for your fourth-line guys is not to be a liability. Josh Archibald is not a liability. He's a decent NHL player. Ryan Reeves has no talent, really, other than, quote, trying to intimidate people and being a good guy in the locker room. And, he did gain my respect for standing up to Trump, which I thought was cool. But he's obviously not working. He took, 28 minutes in penalties, and he's played 6 minutes in the whole game. That's a waste of a roster spot. It's such a waste. You look at how good their team was last year on the fourth line, and then this year you have guys like Ryan Reeves playing there instead of Matt Cullen. Granted, they are missing Hornquist, but you have Ryan Reeves and you have Carter Rowney on the fourth line. And then you have Greg McKegg on your third line. It's not a great bottom six, but at least you make it slightly better by not having a, quote, tough guy in the lineup because he achieved nothing. And the fans like it. But you know what? Fans like a lot of things. Doesn't mean fans really know what they're talking about. I used to like that kind of stuff too, and then I found out there's something called CTE, and then I didn't like it anymore. So, just because fans like it doesn't mean that it should be done. And he's not going to obviously stay with Crosby, but putting with Crosby at the end of the game was absolutely pointless because it achieved nothing. Crosby needs to play with players who can play at his level, who can play at his speed, think at his speed. Ryan Reeves cannot do that. He should never, in any way, shape, or form, be on a line with Sidney Crosby ever. Ever. And yes, Wayne Gretzky, he played with Semenko and whatever, those tough guys. That was the 80s. That was a very different style of hockey back then. It's a much more faster game. It's much more skill game now. You can't be that type of player and play on a top line. You won't even play in the NHL anymore. Enforcers are kind of gone by the wayside. And Ryan Reeves' goal was pretty nice, I admit. And, he did get in front of the net. So, he's not totally an enforcer, but that's basically what he is he's not a complete goon, but he's, like a soft goon. That's more what he prides himself in doing. And those types of players, they don't exist anymore. He doesn't have a lot of offensive skill. And we're going to wonder why in a few months, why we're not getting any bottom six scoring. And a big reason why is because you have Ryan Reeves on the fourth line. And it's not going to cut it. So Pittsburgh's got to do something about that. This is also a team that had Tom Sestito in their lineup for whatever reason for a lot of times, despite the fact that that's not their game. So I think it's kind of external pressure on Mike Sullivan to do that because he didn't play Tom Sestito unless it was against certain teams. Ryan Reeves is a bit better than Tom Sestito, but the same thing. So I think he's getting some external pressure from the top saying, you have to play this player that we traded. We gave up a 31st overall pick for a really skilled player. You got to play this guy. Because they have to justify the trade somehow, right? If they traded for a player and they're not even playing Ryan Reeves, well, it looks really bad on them. So at least if they're playing him and the fans like him, they can justify the trade. That's the way I think that they're looking at it. In my mind, there's nothing that can really justify that trade unless they win the cup again. But even then, that's not going to be because they went out and got Ryan Reeves. It's because they have two of the top 5 centers of all time and the 2 best centers playing right now, basically, in my opinion. So that's why they're going to win the cup again. Anyways, so that's just a little rant in my part. I don't think it's going to be changing anytime soon. Pittsburgh can think all they want, and they can say, well, Crosby likes having them in his line. It doesn't, that doesn't mean anything. Just because he's an amazing player doesn't mean he knows what's right. Look at Wayne Gretzky. He the best player to play, and then he got behind the bench of the Phoenix Coyotes, and then it all went to shit, right? So just because he likes having them doesn't mean that it's the best thing for the team. I mean, come on, that's silliness. It's complete nonsense. Crosby is more than capable of taking care of his own self. We've seen that many times. I mean, he's fought. He's not good at it. He shouldn't fight, but you know, he can get in there. Malkin is more than capable of doing it. Letang is more than capable. They don't need a quote tough guy to protect them, protect their stars. The reason why the players got run around a lot is because the league is a gong show, and the league doesn't care about discipline. And having an enforcer is not going to change that. We see the same thing happening in Toronto when they have Matt Martin on the ice for the Leafs. Matt Martin's supposed to be there to protect Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner. They still get run out every game. He doesn't do anything. You know, he's not a good player. All he's doing is taking up a roster spot while Josh Levo sits in the bench in the press box. Matt Martin's playing there. You know, same thing with Pittsburgh. Josh Levo's obviously a lot better than Josh Archibald, but it's the same principle. You could be calling up Daniel Sprong and have him play there instead of having Ryan Reeves. See what Daniel Sprong could do on the fourth line. At least you get some depth scoring. The idea that you have to have these players on the fourth line to protect stars is complete BS. It's spewed at us by the league in order to justify these roster spots. But really, they do nothing. If they actually worked, then we wouldn't keep seeing players like Crosby, players like David, Carlson, Johnny Gaudreau getting hacked at and whacked at every game. We would, if they actually worked, this is what we would see. But the reason why there's this hacking and whacking is because it's allowed in the league and because the suspensions are terrible. And if the players actually deterred it, we wouldn't see it. But it happens. And it's, you know, that's just a myth because players are not scared of Ryan Reeves. You think Ryan Reeves coming down to them is going to scare Scott Hartnell? No way. He's going to keep doing it. You think that's going to scare Brandon Dubinsky or Mark Stahl? You've got to be kidding me. They're going to keep doing it and keep doing it. It's not going to scare them at all. The only thing that's going to scare them is proper discipline, proper punishment, and we're a long way from seeing that in the NHL, if ever. I mean, Brandon Shanahan started doing it, and they ended everything he did. And he got sick of it, and he left. But now he's employment Martin in the Leafs, so I don't know. Anyways, that's all I have for this game. Otherwise, it was a great game. I'm not even going to talk about what happened yesterday. I've already ranted about that. You can see in my last video. The Penguins are playing tonight against Washington. Very different teams from last time the two teams met. But, again, should be a great game as always. Ovi's back to his old self. He's got 7 goals in 2 games, which is ridiculous. Crosby's also having a great start to the season. Matt Murray has not done as well against Washington as Fleury has in the past, but Murray's still got a good record against them. And Penguins, for some reason, always light up Braden Holtby. So it should be a great game. Penguins-Washington rivalries are always exciting. And I'm looking forward to it. So that's all I have for this video. Please like it if you like, subscribe if you really like it, share with all your friends, tell everyone, and I'll see you after the Washington game. All right, that's all for now. Bye. Go Penguins.